Hey everyone, my name's Amanda and this is Nikki.
Hey!
We are back to chat with you about another spiritual topic. So, Nikki, what did you suggest we talk about today?
So I felt like today we should discuss integrating spirituality and humanness.
Yes, this is a hard topic for me personally, which is why we have to talk about it, right? It's hard to be a human.
It is.
It's hard to be a person sometimes,
Yeah.
especially I think for those of us who are on the spiritual path. I think a lot of times what happens is we awaken and then we're propelled into this place where the world looks a little different.
Yeah.
But it can be hard then to take the truth that you learn and integrate it back into the physical experience you're having. So I feel like I need to translate that into non-spiritually terms for people too. So basically, let me think about what that means. So if you're somebody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, what's a spiritual awakening? What does all that mean? How would you explain this?
Yeah, and I think you're a naturally spiritual person. You're more in that realm more often.
Air signs.
Yes. Yeah.
Aquarius.
Yes.
It's like our birthright.
Yes. So like we've joked about, for you, being human is the harder part than being spiritual.
Yeah.
But for people that have gone through an awakening process or an ascension process, they're going from being entirely identified with human to integrating their spiritual aspects equally so. So when you have an ascension begin, you start with an awakening, which is usually something traumatic has happened. You may be going through a dark night of the soul. Something has jolted you out of the practical, everyday, superficial stuff that we go through. And it could be a car accident. There's a lot of different ways that this happens, but you realize that there is something higher or more than yourself that's constantly interacting. It's not something that you go to church for. It's not something that's just kept in one space. It's a constant communication you have with something higher than you. And so
that's a great explanation.
Yeah. So when you go through the awakening process, you realize, wow, there's more to me than just working. There's more to me than just having sex. There's more to me than feeding my body. There's a spiritual aspect to this existence. And life becomes richer and deeper in meaning. However, there's a few stages after the awakening process that you just kind of hit the skids on a little bit, but we can get into that a little more.
Well, there's a few terms I want to make sure everybody's on the same page about, and I feel like these are terms that are thrown around a lot that not everybody always explains kind of the definition.
Yeah.
So 3 things you said: dark night of the soul,
Yep.
ascension, and I think you explained awakening pretty well. I think that's what you were doing just now. So can we hear about what does dark night of the soul mean?
Yeah. So have you ever heard of Thomas More?
Yes.
He's a brilliant writer. He actually wrote a book, Dark Night of the Soul, and he gets more in depth with that. I highly recommend that book. But a dark night of the soul generally lasts for quite a long time. It can last for months to years. And you find yourself grappling with heavy issues. Maybe you don't identify with who or what you identified with before. You can be experiencing a loss, but it's just a tremendously heavy, dark time where you're processing aspects that maybe you've never grappled with before. And you can feel like, you're trying to work your way into a happier space, and it just does not happen during that time. And you don't come out of that dark night until you've faced whatever truths inside of yourself you've been avoiding.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to say I think there can be a big event or a big trigger for something like that, but it also can be more subtle. Would you agree with that?
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
Sometimes it doesn't feel like there's some trigger event or something that happens that's the reason behind it per se.
Yeah.
I think sometimes something shifts in our consciousness and we open up to what we're ready to face at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's true even for an awakening. I mean, some people don't experience a cataclysmic trigger, just all of a sudden they're more aware. Yeah.
And I think it's important to talk about like all those aspects of it because it looks differently for different people.
It does.
And
it looks radically different.
I know when I first started looking into a lot of this stuff, it's like you're trying to find checkpoints and markers to make sure what you're experiencing is normal or that somebody else has gone through it too, but it really our journeys look so different but have, I think, similar I guess energetic signatures would be how I would say it. So what was the other word? Ascension.
So ascension's kind of the umbrella term which starts with the awakening process. So it usually goes awakening, an integration process, then a mastery process, and a joy process. Ascension is the umbrella term that basically encompasses becoming fully aware.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do we ever get there, or is that just right? We're always kind of climbing on
I think it's
spiral.
a cycle.
Yeah.
I think it's a cycle. Ascension process is a process. Yeah.
So I think sometimes people think ascension always makes me think of the term enlightenment. Like in some traditions, there's this idea that you achieve this certain level of spirituality, and then you don't have to come back, or whatever the story is. But I think it makes it seem like enlightenment is like an end goal.
Right.
I'm not sure there is an end goal, though.
Well, I mean, even if you read historical records of any of the ascended masters, after their initial awakenings, they didn't stop practicing. In fact, they practiced more afterwards.
Yeah.
And that's who I go back to guide me is, yes, they had this massive initial awakening and they did amazing healing work after that. But they invested themselves more into the process of educating themselves and practicing after that. So, I mean,
it's never done.
It's not done.
Yeah.
No, it's actually the beginning. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I think it is that thing of initially when you have that awakening or that new spark, you feel a sense of joy. Like you see the magic of the world in a different way.
Yeah.
But then there's inevitably kind of a crash point after that.
Yeah, that's the integration process.
For me, see, this is what happens is we see what the idealist that I am.
Yes. Yeah.
You see what's possible. You see what could be.
Yeah.
What is the truth under all the lie.
Right.
But then you look out at the world and you're like, what the fuck? Why can't it? If I can see it, if I can know it, then why can't it be? So, that's what I struggle with a lot. So what, do you have advice on that, or?
Oh my God.
SOS?
I have some stories for you. So, I went through I had quite a few dark nights of the soul leading up to what I felt was a really massive awakening for me 2 years ago. And my awakening happened over the course of about 5 to 6 months. And I was just blissed out. I mean, I was just so happy to be in such pure connection with Source every day. Synchronicities were happening. It was like nothing bad could happen during that time. And then the integration process started. And that's when I realized that I had to still be in day-to-day life. I had to be in my humanness, and I had to take all this higher awareness that I had gained and infuse it into my human life. I thought that when I was in my awakening, I was always going to be in this almost separate spiritual state. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's the purpose of ascension. The purpose, I really feel, is to have those two fuse together beautifully in day-to-day life. So I hit a roadblock in my integration. That's when I started feeling like everything wasn't working. I was miserable. I was depressed. And I had to consciously check in every day and ask myself what awareness had come to me in the last few months at the beginning. What wisdom had I gained that I could infuse into this human experience that was happening to me now? Whether that was a traffic jam, making my kids lunch, whatever it was. And I had to go through that process for another 6 months. Integration for me was another 6 months. I was running into medical and health problems, all kinds of things. And the integration process worked, but I had to consciously bring that forth. I could not keep myself separate from the rest of humanity, which I think a lot of people do. When they go through an awakening process, a lot of people leave their families, leave their marriages, leave their homes. They move somewhere, they think they want to be a healer, all these things, which is fine. But I think ultimately that's not the point.
Yeah, and I mean, if that's what's in alignment and that's your call, that's
right.
different than... There's a fine line between what you're being called to do and, I guess, using your spirituality as an excuse to escape.
Right.
And I think sometimes those two things look exactly the same.
Yeah.
And we talk about this a lot.
Yeah.
Sometimes what's in alignment and what is an avoidance tactic looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
So that's why I think discernment is so important.
Discernment
in
is
our
so
own,
important.
Because us within our own experience, we're the only ones who can decide what is in alignment for us.
Right.
And sometimes you have to make the wrong choice.
Yeah.
Not sure there is a wrong choice, but you can make a choice that's a little bit out of alignment as a way to learn what is.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that I think that is what's hard about being human.
Yeah.
Is because on the grandiose scale, when you're tapped into collective truth, there's not that there's not another option, but it's just there's a very clear... It's very clear what is true and what's right.
Right.
But the murkiness and the gray area starts to come down into this human world.
Yeah.
And I know, at least for my journey, I've had it be that my sincerity is mistrusted because people use the same words I use in the form of a lie.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I have a friend who's also an Aquarius, and we always talk about this. It's we don't lie, and people don't understand that about us. A lot of people say they don't lie, or a lot of people say they're telling you the truth, and they're not. But for us, it's I don't understand how, why you would be inauthentic or lie about that. Yeah. And sometimes that gets me into trouble because you feel like you're being naive.
Yeah.
Because you expect the world to be operating in a place where it's not.
Yeah. Always transparent.
Yeah. So, how do you not harden your heart?
Yeah.
How do you stay open when things aren't living up to your idealized version of what you want them to be?
Yeah. That's incredibly challenging.
And not fall into a depression because the world's an upsetting place sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
So, do you have any advice on that?
Staying open.
How to not close off, but also not not absorb the troubles of the world to the point of falling into a dark place.
Yeah. I will say that on the other side of integration, there is much more mastery over that process, because you find yourself constantly moving from a highest love state. And that can be easily misconstrued by a lot of people. So I find myself listening a lot, you know, and validating other people's experiences, practicing really strong, healthy boundaries, and constantly going back to source personally for me to fill up my love cup, so that I'm not moving into a place of resentment or being closed off, you know? 'Cause yeah, once you reach that level, it can be a little bit like, dang, humans suck, you know? A little bit. So there's a lot of it's kind of crazy, more allowance for imperfections and maybe people whose awarenesses haven't reached a certain level yet, but also more healthy boundaries. So I kind of view it as like an expansion of self, you know? So you're expanding your capacity to forgive and allow, and you're also expanding your capacity to not protect yourself, but
I would say nurture.
Yes, yeah. It's like a screen that allows in healthy things and information, but also protects you.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So, do you have tips? I want your tips on that reconnection to source. Like, what do you do when you need to reconnect? Yeah. And I want tips on what do you do when you need to ground down into your human experience more. Like some practical things. Like if someone's looking for, okay, well, that sounds great, but how do I do that?
How do you do that? Yeah, totally. Tangible spirituality.
Yes,
this is
we love that.
My favorite thing in the world is tangible spirituality.
At that.
Yeah. So my spirituality has come about from practicing Reiki, and then meditation. So what was your first question again?
The first question was, how do you reconnect to source when you're feeling like you're getting too bogged down by the human part?
Yeah. So tangible tools. The first one is breathing. Which is kind of interesting because the word spirit, which like the Latin root of that is to breathe.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So basically we find ourselves in like these hunched over positions all the time. What you do is you pop your shoulders back. You make sure that your rib cage is directly over your spine here, and you feel yourself breathe through your stomach up into your rib cage and expand. And you want to even feel the expansion in your ribs all the way up. And you want to breathe in and imagine that the breath is coming up through your feet and up out your crown chakra, and then down and back out. And actually envision the air moving up and through you and then back down and out again. And you want to expand out as much as possible in this space too. So you're moving sort of in all directions, and you want to breathe that way for a few minutes, you know? And what you'll find is as you slow your breath down and you breathe more, your neurological system comes down, your emotional system just calms. There's a lot of things that happen on body, mind, heart, spirit levels. So to breathe is to move in spirit and to reconnect with source. So that's number one.
Oh, that's awesome.
Breathe. Number two, I do conscious communication. So let's say you have a hard time meditating. I hear that a lot. I go directly to, and some people call this prayer, but I go directly to a place inside where I ask myself, please quiet my mind, please connect to source. I'm having issues with whatever thing. You know, if you have guidance, if you have answers, I'm open to that. And you can even do that while you're breathing. Those are my two immediate go-tos.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a lot simpler than I think most people make it.
Yes. I do this multiple times a day, every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can do this while you're driving.
Yeah, you can.
Right. Yeah.
I talk to my people all the time.
Right. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Then the other one was
how to ground back down if you feel like you're a little
if you're floating out. Yeah. I mean, for me, earthing is the best way possible. Kick your shoes off, put your feet on the ground, as much, soil or grass or sand or dirt, whatever you can get your feet into, and just earth out. You can stomp your feet. You can shake around. You see the animals shake, after something bad happens. You can get on the ground and you can just shake.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Those are my two favorites.
I love to take a walk in the park, and I have my favorite tree. It's my favorite tree because it has a little heart carved in it. Aww. I don't know. I feel like that tree is my friend.
Yeah.
I will put my head against the heart on the tree, and I will just close my eyes and breathe with the tree.
Yep.
That helps me. Or I hug the tree. I try not to do it when people are around because I feel like they'll think I'm silly, but sometimes I don't care. But yeah, that connecting with nature.
Connecting with
really
nature.
helpful.
I mean, that's the most grounding thing you can do. Yeah.
I think drinking water too.
Drinking water helps.
Yeah, that's the part I struggle with that part.
Yeah.
Is I feel like I could walk for 10 hours and still be not feel like I'm a person.
Right. You know what? I actually do this a lot. Most of the time, music is going in my house.
Oh,
most of the time. And I like instrumental jazz. For some reason, I don't know if it's the specific frequencies that it has, but it calms the space. Huh. It's very grounding.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That's one of my favorites.
That's good ideas. Mm-hmm. I like that.
I always have music going in my house. And sometimes I have it going upstairs and downstairs.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. I have music a lot too, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm a musician. I hope I'm listening to music. Yeah. Oh, there was something else I thought of while you were talking before. You used the word synchronicity.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really cool if we talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Because I really think it's important to make this kind of healing and spirituality and all of that very accessible to people.
Yeah, very tangible.
I think sometimes people feel like it's this, I don't know, it's these hippie people using these fancy words that are some kind of mystery or secret.
Right.
And I think these are things actually everybody experiences. They just don't call it that.
Yeah.
So synchronicity, my definition of that is just, to me it's the same as really receiving a sign.
Yeah.
Or things coming together that seem kind of like it's too much to be a coincidence.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples of synchronicity?
I know all of us have had those examples where a friend, you reach out to a friend and they're like, "No, that's weird. I was just thinking of you."
Yep.
And that's the most common one. That happens between friends and family a lot.
Yeah.
That's the most common one. And I mean, those aren't accidents. That's synchronicity. That's being hooked up. Do you know much about quantum mechanics?
I don't know.
Okay,
Tell us, Nikki.
I'm not going to go into my crazy nerd zone here.
I know a little bit about quantum entanglement.
Okay, so we're going to talk about that. If you split a photon,
let's go,
which is a light particle, in two, and you send them in opposite directions, their paths will exactly mirror each other, as if they're in constant communication.
That's awesome.
Isn't that amazing? And we are just waves and particles. So it makes sense that we would have modes of communication with people that we're close to and we connect with, where, like a cell phone, we receive a signal. Yeah.
That's sciencey.
Yes. I like the science behind all of this stuff. Yes.
And for me, I'm connected to my loved ones.
Yeah.
Always. And
right.
That's why.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, embodied or not, that frequency, that vibration, that communication is still there. Yeah.
That's really awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was a really simple explanation, too.
Yes.
You said the word quantum, and I understood what you said.
Yeah. quantum and make it very simple. It's hard to do, but we're going to do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, synchronicities, some people see certain numbers, like have favorite numbers or number
see
sequences.
the angel numbers,
I've had a couple funny ones lately. I'll see license plates or signs with certain names that are relevant to me. Lately, one of my spirit guides has been enjoying painting pictures for me in the clouds. So that's fun. I've actually seen 2 different times. The last time was probably almost a year ago. I saw an angel in the clouds, like unmistakable. Mm-hmm. And I just saw it again last week or the week before. So you think twice? 2 times I can look up in the sky and see an angel. That can't be an accident.
Yeah.
Right? Come on.
I think we all have those experiences all the time. It's just, do we treat them as sacred or do we blow them off?
And I think also it's in the fast pace of living, of being human. Yes. Are we open and paying attention? Because, I feel like spirit or the universe or whatever you want to call it, God, I think that they're always trying to reach us. Right. It's just we have free will here and we have the choice whether to open our eyes and see it or not. And I think that's why a lot of people do require to loop back around to like awakening and ascension. Like, I think a lot of times we require being jolted out of our humanness in order to be open to what's happening.
Well, and I was just going to say, for me, the most significant gift that came out of my awakening was fucking stopping. Just stop moving.
Yeah.
Be present. And I mean, I've held being present as a sacred thing for a long time. I mean, since my son was born. That's the number one parenting guideline that has saved my ass, is be present. But there were a lot of other areas that I was just moving a million miles an hour on, and I realized there's so much I'm missing because I'm not embodied, I'm not appreciating the moment.
Yeah.
So more gratitude came in, more abundance came in. It felt like time slowed down again.
Yeah.
Which is such a gift because it has felt like it's just been speeding up over the years. And literally time slowed down for me again. Huh. That's a huge gift.
That's awesome. And it's like a paradox, right? That when we take time to nurture our spirit and spend time with spirit and source, that actually allows us to be more present in our humanness.
Right. What's that funny little meme that's like, if you're stressed out, you should meditate for an hour, and if you have no time, then you should meditate for 10 hours or something like that. It's true. It's true. It works like in reverse somehow.
Because I think you're actually better able to handle the stressors.
Yes.
If you've given yourself the space to do that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Wow. I never I guess I have thought of it that way, but that's a really streamlined way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
I guess it shifts the intention or the purpose behind why you're meditating.
Yeah.
Or why you're connecting to source. I'm not connecting to source to transcend my humanness.
Right.
I'm connecting in order to better live as a human.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. That's a perspective shift that I definitely experienced.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, because I think a lot of times people who are spiritual teachers who are very heavy into this type of work, there is a tendency towards almost an air of superiority.
Oh, yeah, like separateness. There is, yeah.
And I think there's a place, I think there's a place for the sacred types who retreat. Like, I think we need nuns and monks, and I think we need the hermit who is drawing inward. Like, I think those people and what they do has just as much value as anyone else. But I think we also need people who are in the world and creating change with what we have.
Yeah.
If you're disengaged, I think it's hard to, you can have peace within yourself, and that is important.
Yep.
But I do think we need people on the front lines doing that work too.
Yeah. Yeah, because we're always going to have our higher types that go into the mountains and devote their lives to that. And we're also always going to have people that choose to have families, and live in cities and towns. And we need to have tangible spirituality methods for all of us.
Yeah. And why? If you're someone who's like, well, why do I need spirituality? I think the why of it is what we talked about a little bit in our last video, that these parts of ourselves are not separate. That if your body is ill, there's probably a deeper, mental, spiritual, emotional reason. That I think we all heal and we all get better when we start to put these pieces together and connect it all.
Right. And I'd like to bring up, because I have a lot of friends that are atheists, and some people are turned off by the word spirit or spirituality because it's immediately associated with organized religion.
Yeah.
For me, I truly believe that my atheist friends are deeply spiritual.
Yeah.
They can connect to themselves, they can meditate, and they may not be describing what they experience as a connection to God or to Source. That doesn't mean that they're not practicing a connection.
Yeah. Awareness.
Yeah. And to something higher, whether that's their own personal intuition, whatever that is. To me, that is still a sacred practice. Yeah. And I really don't care what terms are used for it.
Yeah. And I think on the opposite side of that, I think there are a lot of people who practice organized religion who are turned off by the idea of spirituality. Those hippie people who run naked in the woods and whatever the stereotype is, right? I don't think anyone actually ever lives up to a stereotype, but I think there's that whole other side of it of they're turned off by these conversations too. And I don't think any of what we're talking about is incongruent with organized religion either.
I don't think it's conflictual at all.
That's what's interesting about it is again, like, to me, the point of that organized religion is having a structured way to connect to Source, whatever that source is in your religion. So you can go to church every Sunday and come home and meditate.
Yeah.
And I think those things aren't. Yeah. Those things don't. They're not at opposition with each other. Right. You can pray in church and be doing what we're talking about.
Right.
That's what's cool, is everybody finds their own way.
Yeah. I moved more towards alignment with spirituality because the experience that I had growing up with religion felt very separated from my body and my day-to-day life. It was very cerebral. Like what we were taught was very cerebral and
by
disconnected.
Rote. Like
yes.
Kind of like you're saying things by rote, but it's not getting in.
Yeah, or that, it was dedicated to certain spaces. And even as a child, that didn't align with me. Mm-hmm. I would be out riding my horse or walking in a field and feel divinity. And so finally, by the time I reached 19, I was like, I'm not turning my back on the religion I was raised in, but I want to know more. I want to feel more. I want to experience God literally in every second of every day. And how does that impact my decision making, my life choices, all of that? So I move more towards an organic spirituality and what I now call a tangible or a grounded spirituality.
Yeah.
But I don't think it complements whatever religion you choose to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, awesome.
The end.
We're like, we've been talking for a while now, so I guess it's time to wrap up. But is there anything else you want to say before we say goodbye to our lovely people?
I don't think so. I think we hit some good points. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're a spirit. You're a light being. You're also a person in a body. That's the sum up, right?
Yes. And you're in the zone when you're like integrating.
When you're
those
both of those things.
Yes.
Yes.
That's a beautiful life.
We try. We try to make a beautiful life.
Yeah.
Well, let us know in the comments below what you think about what we've said. If you have any topics that you'd like us to try to tackle, that could be fun.
That would be fun.
Give us ideas
we
if
can
you
try
want.
that.
We're not an expert on everything. Well, at least I'm not. Nikki knows everything.
No. How about I ask you a question?
she said quantum in this video, so
I really stepped in it on that one.
That's awesome. Maybe we'll do a sciencey video.
I would love that.
I don't know anything, so I'm ready.
Woo.
I like to learn.
Me
So
too.
awesome. Well, we will see you next time. And until then, we wish you all the best.
Many blessings.
Bye.
Bye.